So one thing I found as a woman who's dating, right? A woman who has come from, or at least experienced, I guess you could say, religious communities, right? And when I think about relationships, obviously we know how narrow the path of relationships should be, or how it goes when you start talking about religion. And as I'm getting older, I realize how immature Christianity, or let me not say Christianity, I'll say religion is or can be in many ways, right? Because it kind of teaches you that there's going to be this perfect person, this perfect relationship, this perfect thing. And I think it kind of holds you back from really being yourself, and even like dating or just like having any experiences with the opposite sex in a healthy way. I think that it creates almost like an obsession, a sense of entitlement and a sense of obligation, because you're like, well, I've been waiting so long. I deserve to have, you know what I mean? X, Y, and Z. But I think I was more so thinking about, when we talk about safety, and this really could have been added on to the last podcast episode, but I was like, I don't know. But when you talk about safety, I realized that as a woman, you're going to feel safe in a relationship when, one, you're with someone who wants you, right? You're with the guy who chose you to be his wife, to be his, you know what I mean? Like, he wants you for a lifetime, right? He wants to love you. He wants to protect you. He wants to honor you. Like, he literally wants you for the lifetime. So that's the one thing. I think the second thing is you'll feel safe as a woman in a relationship when you are at a place in your life where you know that you can walk away and be okay. And that looks like really having a sense of independence about yourself, right? Like, and this is why I say I think that a lot of time religion can be a little bit immature, because, as a woman, you should feel a sense of security within yourself, knowing that, okay, I am going to be okay if this relationship doesn't work out, right? I am going to be okay if this person decides to leave my life, right? I am going to be okay no matter what. And I think that what happens with religious communities is that there's this unrealistic expectation, but most importantly, there's this aspect of it that's like you're bound to this person, even if this person abuses you. And women are really discouraged from having any sense of agency over their lives and who they are, right? I think what's really unfortunate is that because we are so narrow-minded, we take women having a sense of independence and being able to take care of themselves, right, as feminism, right, as like radical feminism. Like, we look at women who have a sense of independence, which is really womanhood when you think about it. When you get older, when you're a young girl, you're young, you're playful, right, there are still certain aspects of that still shows up in womanhood, right? But it's like when you become a woman, you're mature, right? Like, you're able to have a sense of independence. You're no longer depending on your dad for money. You know what I mean? Like, you're able to take care of yourself. Like, you should, that is womanhood. That is what it's like to be a young adult. And I just think that we kind of live in a society today where it's so small-minded that I don't think women are really getting the opportunity to kind of become women, right? I think that so many women are kind of stunted in that. And it's seen because of, it's really just because of so many negative things, so many negative aspects of like womanhood, or negative depictions or perceptions that go around about womanhood. And it's like, no, womanhood is such a beautiful thing. And I think what happens is like you have these young women who just take this Disney fantasy, and then it just kind of becomes this just continuous obsession. And you're always looking for someone to rescue you. You're always looking for someone to fix you and be all these different things. And you never find it, you never find it. I think at best what you end up finding is like a second father figure. And I think in those relationships, the dynamic is so lopsided, and it's almost like a freaking Oedipus complex, right? Like, it's just weird, because you're with someone and it's like you look at this person as a father figure, like someone who literally take care of you. And, it's no different than young men, right? It's like when you don't have that sense of independence in your life, you are so needy, right? In your relationships with women, you find yourself just needing way too much. You know what I mean? Like, you're constantly latched on, and I just don't think that healthy relationships can kind of coexist in that space, and then I think we start talking about marriage and you start talking about these, just extraneous, like, extensive periods of like singlehood because you're not dating and you're afraid to date because you don't know if this is from Satan, and you know what I mean? Like that puts you in a space where you're not really, I'm not going to say caught up with the times, because I don't think it's a matter of trend, but it's like you don't really know how to conduct yourself and fully interact and engage with the opposite sex, right? That's what you're attracted to. Engage with the opposite sex in a healthy way. It's almost like putting a child in a professional setting, right? And it's almost like not having any experience professionally, right? And your career is going to get to a point where you're not even going to know how to conduct yourself in certain rooms, and you're not going to gain the skills that you need professionally to really grow and advance in your career or in any profession, entrepreneurship or whatever. So you'll always kind of be capped at like this low minimum paying job because you don't have the skills, and you never really develop the professional skills and the people skills, and knowing what's appropriate and what's not appropriate, what to wear and what not to wear. You know what I mean? And I think that that's kind of what it becomes with dating. And I think that that is something that is another reason too, we start talking about singlehood and like the perpetual state of, single women and so forth. And it's not just women. I think it's men too. So, you have to understand that like we should be having experiences, right? We should be having experiences as people, as young adults, so that when we become mature, we have a culmination of experiences, and we're able to say, okay, this is who I am. This is what I want. This is what I don't want. This is what's normal. This is what's not normal. And I think what you have is really just like people constantly telling you what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And you'll find yourself really just kind of being controlled, and you will find yourself, feeling really resentful, because it's like you're going to look up and you're going to realize that, what you got wasn't what you really wanted. And it's because you allowed other people to make decisions for you. So, we talk about red flags. I mean, when someone's disrespecting you, anything outside of that, right? Like this fixation on red flags and so forth, it just kind of becomes fear-based tactics. And I think that that's another marketing tool, right? People just use fear-based tactics. I mean, I talk about dating coaches. I mean, these are Christian male dating coaches who are married, who, should be encouraging women to find Black men and creating a haven for Black love and creating that space. But instead, they're just constantly pushing out content that is fear-based, that is telling women what not to look for, why men are like this, and why you can't trust a man like that. And it's like when you sit and consume that, right, continuously, you're going to eventually be in a space in your life where you're going to be afraid of men. You're not going to want to talk to men. You're not going to even know how to show up and interact with men. You're going to have so much anxiety because you don't even believe at this point that something like that is possible for you. And I think we start talking about the layers of this as well, right? We already know that Black men in society are deemed as aggressive. They're seen as, you know what I mean? And you start talking about the modern movements as well, in terms of like certain women movements, right? White women's advocacy movements and so forth, and how it's really just this perpetual state of predatory men, right, that is pushed into the media. And so it's like you also have that. And so there's so many layers to that, but it's like then you put Christianity on there, and you start talking about religion, and you start talking about Satan, and you start talking about all these different things in terms of like fear. And it just becomes this whole thing where now you're in a space where you're just completely shut off from everyone. Or at worst, you find yourself putting yourself in dangerous situations because it's like your mind is like on autopilot, and you're, you know what I mean? Like your like fight or flight type response is going off, and you're not really able to kind of sit and engage and be like, okay, what is real and what isn't, and I don't know. I think one thing that, more religious leaders could do is like, talk about courtship, talk about how to interact with one another. I think one thing that's really unfortunate about the Black community specifically is because of the hypersexualization that persists within our media, that persists within, from a historical standpoint, right? It's origination with our historical standpoint, and then you look forward and, move forward, and there's the media and so forth. Our relationships are perverted so early on, right? Between young males and young women. I mean, it's like after the 7th grade, like obviously, like there's adolescence and there's hormonal changes and so forth. That's one thing. But I think outside of that, it's like there's always, you know what I mean? Like that hypersexualization, that negative representation of, the hypersexualization of the Black body is something that doesn't only affect how other people see us, but it also affects how we see each other. And so I think that that's another layer to it. But yeah, overall, I just think that, we do kind of have to mature beyond religion. We have to really tap into our lives, into the world. And, we have to stop being afraid to live, and we have to stop being afraid to have experiences and interact with the opposite sex. Because I think what that's doing is it's not really good. You know what I mean? I think that you talk about loneliness and depression, all these different things, like it's very unhealthy. And so, like I said, I don't know. I just think that we need to kind of look up and realize how certain influences are impacting us and how we're interacting with one another and so forth. Because I do think that's becoming a thing, right? And so when you see men in that way, it's going to make it really hard for you to partner with a man. And, when you're, your sensations and your sensuality, especially as Black women, it's something that's demonized. Like I've even heard Christian males saying like being a woman and being, affectionate and things like that, or too affectionate when you're dating is a red flag or whatever the case may be. And it's like, what we don't realize is that this type of rhetoric that is so repetitive, it really creates repulsion, in terms of like our relationship. So instead of it being harmony, instead of it being something that's a little authentic, and that doesn't mean you're pushing against the bounds, but I just think that when you start talking about the shame tactics, right, of religion and Christianity, especially as it pertains to like Black women and Black men and Black women, then yeah, you're going to have a lot of people in a room who are afraid to look at one another. You're going to have a lot of people in the room who are going to be very much apprehensive and almost like averse to one another instead of actually coming together in harmony, which was God's original design. And that doesn't mean that you need to, rush off and do certain things, right? That's not what I'm condoning, but I'm just talking about, it's the simple things like holding hands, or, you know what I mean? We're really at this point today where I'm not kidding. It's like guys and women and men, and like I've, dated a guy, and it's like, this guy was just so like, you know what I mean? So reserved to the point I was like, okay, like this is weird, And I just think that is something that is a little concerning. Like I said, I think it's something that's concerning. I think when you have the movements, the women's movements who are telling men like men are predatory and men are this and women don't want that and don't and, consent and all these. And obviously we should have consent. Hold on, wait a minute. Like we should have consent. Like let me not say that in that tone. Like that's real. But I just think when you have all the rules and the regulations and the continuous do's and don'ts, and mostly don'ts, it's going to rub the natural flow and order of things. So when people talk about forcing things, well, what you have to understand is that when you put all these stop and goes, and this content is like booming, right? Everybody is being inundated with this content, then what you feel right in your body is something you're going to question. It's something you're going to suppress, right? It's been a long time. You haven't connected with anybody. You haven't even met someone that you even like or find attractive or whatever. And when that person shows up in your life, instead of you, being at ease, now you have a sense of anxiety. Oh my God, am I functioning right? You know what I mean? It's going to completely, the relationship is not going to do what a relationship should do, because it's like you're in this space now where it's like, you're just questioning a lot of things, you know what I mean, about yourself and what you're feeling. And I think if you are dating or if you're meeting people and you don't have the ability to trust yourself and what you're feeling, then I don't know where that's going to leave you, right? You're always going to be left at the hands of someone else telling you about yourself and what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. And so, yeah, I think that this is impacting men and women. So I think that this is where we are in relationships. And I do think that it's time to grow up. It's time to mature. It's time to grow into, the best version of yourself. Peace.